Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing part 32 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and compare them to their real-life fossil counterparts. And today, this is going to be the last mod spotlight that we do before the release of the Dominion Malta expansion, but we've got a quite interesting assortment of animals today. It's almost like a little bit of return to form. We've got part 2 of OG Bear's like paleo edits, and we're going to have a look through them. And then we're also going to have a look at a new dinosaur that's also been made by Hyper SGYT. So we're going to get stuck into that rather quick. No need to dilly-dally around, but we're going to be starting off here with everyone's favorite cute little Australian ankylosaur, Minmi. Let's have a look at these cute little goobers. So this is Minmi. Though, to explain a little bit about this guy, the anatomy of Minmi is not as well known as its close relative, and which was originally considered to be a species or a type of Minmi is Cumbarasaurus. And Cumbarasaurus was discovered in 1989 in Queensland of Australia, but it was described its own species in 2015, Cumbarasaurus iversi, which means shield, basically shield lizard. So that, and the science species name honors Mr. Ian Ivers, who originally found the fossil, which is pretty cool. And there's been a couple specimens found throughout there. So very similar to Minmi, Cumbarasaurus is obviously a small ankylosaur dinosaur, which is pretty interesting, ankylosaurid. So yeah, you can see some of the changes here, especially to the skull. You can tell, I instantly saw the skull of this guy and thought that is Cumbarasaurus, because Cumbarasaurus has a very interesting skull, like a very boxy skull with a kind of a longer beak, as you can kind of see here. Let's see if we can get a top view there like that. That's perfect. That's reminiscent of Cumbarasaurus. And I can see why they OGB used Cumbarasaurus as a reference, because Cumbarasaurus is much better preserved. There's actually a specimen with its skin and its osteoderms preserved, so really gives us a really important look at these guys here. So you can see the changes to the skull there. Let's finish with the beak. The old kind of like turtle scoots that were going, or turtle scales going across the face here, are kind of removed now, so it looks much more accurate to how it would look like on a ankylosaur. But we can see that neck's been thinned out a little bit as well. Kind of that very round body. The tail could probably be a little bit longer and thinner, but that still looks really, really nice. And we can see the legs have been changed there. They've also been thinned out a bit. There could be some changes to the feet, but ultimately the back legs are fine. The front legs is a little bit weird with this kind of fourth digit sticking out here, but you need the fourth and fifth kind of out there, creating that kind of little horseshoe look. But yeah, it came out really, really nicely. Cumbarasaurus is definitely a very cool dinosaur. And in terms of how it's related, Cumbarasaurus and Minmi, which is originally kind of considered, is not as well known as Cumbarasaurus, of course, in terms of its anatomy, but they're in this group that has recently been described with animals such as Intactopelta and Stegosaurus, which is a ankylosaur from South America that has like this really, really interesting tail. If last year is kind of big on the news, a really, really cool animal. I love Stegosaurus. I'm surprised no one's made a mod of it yet, but it's only a matter of time. They were in this own group of really basal southern hemisphere ankylosaurs, so they're in the group Pan-Ankylosauria. So this was before the split between Ankylosaurs and Nodosaurs, so that Ankylosaurus and Ankylosaurus, things like that, and Nodosaurus like Polacanthus and things like that. These guys were an early southern hemisphere kind of split off of that group and really became their own thing in Australia and South America and Antarctica, and a really, really cool bunch of animals. I do really love this guy. I think he's come out wonderfully. OG Bear always does a wonderful job with these guys, so let's let these guys run off and do their thing. We'll watch them do their little dance thing, because they like doing that right in front of my enclosures for some reason. But I'll let them do their thing. So watch this. They just like to do it, hang around here. We're going to have a look at these cute little animations. Have a look at these cute little guys. I really like that they changed to the Chasmosaurus, because Chasmosaurus is much better known in terms of its anatomy. As he's going to bite that tail. Yeah, it's really come out wonderfully. I'm definitely a big fan. Really, really awesome. So let them run off and do their thing. It's not in front of my hatchery. There we are. Okay, so we'll let them run off do their thing. Next up, we have got, also by OG Bear, we've got Chasmosaurus. So let's have a look at this wonderful Chasmosaurus and see how much it's changed. You can see it's changed drastically. You can see the skull's been greatly thinned out there, and you can see the more accurate skull of it. A little less like Triceratops with a little bit of bigger nose horn and the smaller brow horns with that long snout. Makes it look really, really nice, and you can see the changes to the frill. And I really love these eye spot designs. This kind of color design on it is actually really, really awesome. And I think it's cool because both the patentless and the patent version both work super well, and they've both come out so wonderfully. I'm definitely a really big fan of that. So you can see the change of the face there. Really much better fits the anatomy that we know of Chasmosaurus, especially in that face there. And then you can move to the body. The body's obviously got quite a bit of a tummy tuck. They don't have those big elephantine legs that are very much like the Jurassic Park type ceratopsians. You can see those legs have also been thinned out a bit, much more columnar for holding the weight of their body. And you can see they've got the right feet as well with the 3 digits, with the toes, with the nails, and then you have the 2 on the corner here without them, and almost like a weird hand thing going on. Also, the changes to the back here. They've got the big 4-toed feet at the back here. Really, really interesting. And you can see that round body. Almost looks really weird on the Chasmosaurs because the body's used to them being so round, but they've actually come out rather perfectly to the shape of it. Also, that tail is probably a little bit longer than expect, but still looks rather nice. Definitely looks like a realistic Chasmosaurus, and I'm really happy with how this guy's come out. Really, really awesome. Nice to see people actually following the anatomy. And even these little changes to these models, you can see just brings the animals so much more to life. And the color pattern I'm in love with, especially this one. You can see that white and then the orange and the contrasting of that. Really incredible. I'm definitely a big fan of this guy. OG Bear's really done a wonderful job. So let them run off and do their thing. I want them to just all move away from my hatcheries so I don't have to deal with them all the time. So next up, we've got another big herbivore, and our last of our big herbivores, we have got Edmontosaurus. So we can see some major changes to our big boys here. Really, really awesome. Let's have a look at you since you're such a bright color. But we can see definitely some changes to the face. This really reminds me of E. annectens, which is the later species of Edmontosaurus, because there's 2 species, there's Regalis and annectens. Regalis is from a little bit earlier, like the Horseshoe Canyon, Dinosaur Park Formation, those kind of formations. And annectens comes from like Hell Creek and the Lance Formation, things like that, right at the late Cretaceous, right at the end of the dinosaurs. And you can see they kind of took the same approach with the original game. That kind of has the skull and body proportions and stuff of a neck dens, but they also added the crest of Regalis to make it look a little bit more visually striking, which I cannot blame. But you can see those improvements to the face there, and I really like how the pattern's still there as well. The neck's also been greatly thickened up because there's been a lot of study into the neck of like hadrosaurs, especially with that recent Parasaurolophus paper, showing that there's lots of large ligaments and muscles, showing that their necks were much thicker, much more almost like a cow. So it kind of gives that little bovids. So it really gives that kind of thicker look to it. Really makes it look much more like a big bulky animal as well. And you can see some changes to the. Let's see if you can see some any changes to the scales. So there's too many scales, but it looks quite nice. And you can see the little skin tabs at the top, which looks quite nice. They should probably be like little keratin things, but that's just how it was in the original model. And then we can see the body's also being quite bulked around. And you can see these guys are lizard-hipped, not lizard-hipped, bird-hipped dinosaurs. So what happens is that the pubis and the ischium are kind of pushed back there and create this little divot there. That's what the cloaca would be, of course, and all that. And you see that quite large sweeping tail that I think has actually been extended. And one of the big surprises you can see, we can look at the feet. And due to recently, you can see the changes here. Let's see if we can find one slightly nicer, probably over here since he's not standing in the grass. But more recent evidence from around 2019 or so, these Edmontosaurus is known from quite good skin impressions, especially from specimens like Dakota, things like that. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that these hadrosaurs had much more hoof-like mittens instead of those either flesh mittens with nails. They kind of had these two hoof things going on. So you have this large hand here with the two hooves, the big digit and the second one here, and also kind of like a little smaller thumb going on there. Very almost reminiscent of ungulates, and it's a really great example of like convergent evolution, since these guys are not that closely related to each other, but they came up with this almost sort of similar hoof kind of design, which is really, really cool if you're studying evolution as well, and really just shows how much we can learn even about animals that died millions and millions of years ago. It teaches us a lot about how hadrosaurs looked, which is really cool. And you can also see those back feet there, pretty much spot on, a little bit more rounded, but really, really nice. And you can see that long tail. And the great size is definitely, if you just took that crest off there, that'd basically be a perfect ear neck dens. But really, really awesome. I'm definitely a big fan of how those guys come out. OG Bear, I think, really has been paying attention to the anatomy. And especially when I point out the feet all the time, because those are the easiest things to get wrong. I don't have like a thing for feet, so be aware of that. Please don't accuse me of being that weird. But it's just the feet are the easiest thing to get wrong on these models. But yeah, we'll let these guys walk off and do their thing, run off. But yeah, I'm really glad OG Bear's really taking the time to pay attention to the anatomy, things like that. Create some nice paleo-accurate dinosaurs for us to enjoy. So let them walk off, do their thing. Next up, we've got Coelophysis, another remake done by OG Bear, or another paleo edit. Let's see if we can get... Pleased to welcome a Coelophysis to the park, and what a great little guy these are. So we can see some little changes to the skin there, I think. You can see some of the patterns as well. Not too many, but you can see some of the minor edits these guys have had. They also added that kind of little notch at the end of the jaw there that they had, which is very fitting of Coelophysis bellurai. And they've also got this quite long neck and really interesting look to them, almost like that extended eye socket. Really gives it a really interesting look. That longer neck, and you can see some changes to the arms there. And these guys had 4-fingered hands, which is you can kind of see here, hopefully. Let's see if you can find it. They don't have the 4th finger, I believe, though that may have been preserved in flesh, but mainly got those big 3-fingered hands. Potentially 4, depending on kind of whether that was out of the skin or not, is kind of neither here nor there. But you can see some changes to the body there. Much more round and large. Coelophysis is, remember, was one of those earlier dinosaurs, so it wasn't quite as big and imposing as a lot of the early dinosaurs, but still a really, really cool animal that tells us a lot about the evolution of dinosaurs. And you can see those the thighs been changed a lot, so it's a lot more thin and with much more bird-like, along with the feet as well. Have feet's been shrunk a little bit. They didn't have quite as large feet as they do in the game, which is sometimes an issue. But yeah, really, really nice. Let's see if we can get a A really, really nice model here. Ooh, let's see if we can... We'll have a look at this one, since this one's got a much more straight pattern. And we can also see that the tail's been greatly extended. Coelophysis does have quite a long tail, and you can see like the model, the rig's kind of just like droops off a bit because it's just so long. But yeah, it really gives us a nice look at these guys. And you can see the arms have also been thinned up. A lot of the limbs of the Jurassic Park dinosaurs, they make them too fat, the tail's too short. That's kind of the general consensus of what are the main things they get wrong. But we can see that's all been changed here, and it much better reflects the anatomy of Coelophysis. And it's really, really cool to see that. So let's let them run off and do their thing before we have a look at our next guy. So we've got here, last but not least for this area here, we've got Cryolophosaurus. So let's get a good look at these guys. Have a look at one roaring over here. Now we'll have a look at you, since you are looking quite pretty there. But we can definitely see some of the differences from the game here. The original Cryolophosaurus that is in the game is very 90s style, very much like a big, bulky Allosaurid almost. But in reality, Cryolophosaurus is much more closely related to Dilophosaurus, and especially with the more recent this redescription of Dilophosaurus showing how different it really was. We got a really nice edit going on here, so we can see the neck looks like it's been made quite a bit longer, and the body's been thinned out quite a bit, and you can also see that big extension of the pubis there. Those larger arms as well, you can kind of see on here, much bigger and with the big claws. I believe these guys had three, because they're tentaneurans, which means they have 3 fingers on there. So it looks really, really cool. You can also see some changes to the skull. The crest also has been changed. Not quite as impressive, I think, as in the original one, but this is a little bit more realistic to what we know. And we can also see some changes to the skull. We can see it's much more thinned out, much skinnier, not quite as boxy. And then we can also see the smaller kind of like a hook jaw with the premaxilla as well, which would have been quite useful for getting slippery prey or smaller prey trying to run away from you. And very similar to most recent reconstructions of like Dilophosaurus skulls. So it does really fit quite well, though we don't have the best remains from Cryolophosaurus. Really shows its makes it look distinct, and basing it off its closest relatives and things like that, of course. It looks really, really nice, and you see that even just those little changes, so it makes the neck look a little less bulky and less JP, much more lithe and interesting. You also see the tail's definitely been extended quite a bit, and there's thighs been changed, and the feet been changed to a much better fit, almost like birds, things like that, with the longer claws and everything. So yeah, another really, really nice edit by OG Bear. Really, really cool. Let's let them run off and do their thing. So next up, moving over here. So we've got another big animal here, done by OG Bear. We have got Suchomimus. So there's an interesting animal. We can see what changes have been made. There's been a lot on Suchomimus recently because it's been kind of central in the debate of whether Spinosaurus and its relatives were kind of aquatic. We can see some of the changes here. It's obviously been thinned out, especially that skull. It's been thinned out quite a bit, and that sail's been extended a little bit as well. We see the arms are quite a bit beefed up as well. You can see those large claws that have been used for catching fish and things, and also see the jaws there has also been changed, also been thinned up quite a bit. This one probably had the most minimal changes because the original games one was actually pretty spot on to begin with for the most part, other than maybe the arms and things like that. But we can see how interesting that profile changes once you add kind of that extended spines and things like that. Really, really big and rounded things here. Also that pubic boots also sticking out there. Looking at that really, really round body, but tall bodies you can kind of see there. Very thin. Not very wide animal, you can see. Also some changes to the legs there, all pretty minor. Less like those 90s style big, fat, pompadour dinosaur legs, much more bird-like modern interpretations of dinosaurs. Uh, Instead of those big pompadour elephant-like legs, they've got the much more sleeker bird-like or ostrich-like legs, which are really, really nice. And now we can also see some little extensions to the tail, which makes it a little bit more longer and a little bit more elegant and much more like the realistic Suchomimus. Probably based on some pretty good skeletals as well. So let them run off and do their thing. As they walk right in front of my hatchery while I'm trying to do things. Not very helpful, eh? But anyway, we're going to be moving on to another cool animal. We have got, moving from Spinosaurs to Abelisaurs, we have got Majungasaurus. So we can see this one's got some very extensive changes, which are really, really awesome. Definitely a big fan of the changes here, but we can see a lot of the changes, especially to the face here. The skull's been quite a bit shortened. Majungasaurus has this really, really pushed in face, like most Abelisaurids, and it's also got this big horn coming out here. And I really like the changes of the colors as well, with that dark line and white line on the face there. Really makes some interesting contrast. I love that this one's also got some patterns as well. This one looks beautiful. This is almost like what I expected to look like, considering the habitat it lived in. Very reptile, like monitor lizards. It reminds me a lot of that. Yeah, you can see also that long neck. They had a comparatively quite long neck and quite round and squarish body. They've almost been called like sausages because they've got quite long and big bodies. But the biggest changes you can see here is the arms. So it doesn't have those really weird kind of Jurassic Park style arms where they've got the 5 fingers but they're holding out like this, and they're actually much too large. Abelisaurids are quite notable for having quite small arms that face backwards like this, and they've also got the kind of 4-fingered hands or 5-fingered hands. I believe it's 4-fingered hands going around the back there. Makes it look really interesting, but they still have that quite large pelvic girdle, which creates that quite rounded look that we've got going on there. Really has come out wonderfully, I think, and also quite rounded, quite big round body. Majungasaurus actually has pretty short legs compared to most other Abelisaurs. Most like Carnotaurus and things like that have quite long legs, but these guys are kind of the opposite. They've got those short legs, and you can see that kind of represented in here with those big feet and long leg, not long legs, big big thigh hair and the short legs really give it an interesting profile, which makes it suggest that they were most likely in some sort of ambush predator, which kind of makes sense for its ecology. And then we have this quite long tail, because Majungasaurus did actually have quite a long tail, believe it or not, probably to help compensate a little bit with the balance. But yeah, I think that's also been extended a lot. And I really like the not only the anatomy changes that it's got, but I also really like the changes to the patterns that OGBR has put on. But the only thing I'd probably miss is the much more osteoderms. Like you can see the osteoderms and kind of the back here are pretty minimal, but on the original model there was quite a few going along the back and things like that. It'd be nice to kind of bring them back, but I'm still really happy with this one, and I love the patterns on it as well. Definitely a great improvement in terms of anatomy, and it looks really, really awesome. I'm definitely a big fan. You can see the changes to the face there. Let's just admire the face of Majungasaurus there for a moment. See that really long and kind of S-shaped neck they've got there. Majungasaurus is definitely a very interesting dinosaur, and I'm definitely a big fan of this edit. Really, really cool. Let them run off and do their thing. So next up, we've also got another really, really cool dinosaur here. We have got a remake of Giganotosaurus. Last one done by OG Bear, I promise. So you can see some of the little changes on here. A lot of, as I mentioned, kind of the one that was originally based, the original reconstruction was like a very older kind of like early 90s, late 90s reconstruction. But we can see a lot of the changes to this guy here. We can see the skull's not quite as long and extended as it was in the original. So a little bit shortened up. And a little bit taller as well, a lot taller, and we can sort of see those extensions to the crest, which looks really, really cool. I'm definitely a big fan of how this guy's come out. And also that little bit shorter neck. It did have quite a robust neck there, it seems, or shorter than a lot of other theropods. And also you can see some changes to the body. It's also, especially on the more recent skeletals, there's a lot taller neural spines around the back there, which really give it that really tall profile and quite a bit bigger arms, that they could probably be made a little bit smaller in this one. And yeah, really, really nice, I think. Also that longer tail as well. I think it has come out rather nicely. Let's see if we can get a slightly better one there. There we are. Has come out rather nicely. Definitely a big fan. But one thing that's really cool, I really want to see this incorporated into more reconstructions of Giganotosaurus, is because of its close relative Meraxes, which was just discovered this year. It believed to have had some like convergent traits with Tyrannosaurs, so they would likely have been shrinking their arms quite a bit as well. So the arms of Giganotosaurus and potential animals like that wouldn't have been quite as big and much smaller than normally depicted. And then you have potentially as well this large claw on the outer digit here, almost like a raptor, like Velociraptor. It wouldn't have been used in the same way. Velociraptor probably would have used it as very tactical, like going for the throat or going for soft parts. But Megaraxes and Giganotosaurus, if it did possess this kind of large claw, would have most likely used it for kicking, so potentially kicking each other or prey items potentially, or even potentially just putting it on prey to help them rip apart, since they don't really have the hands. They'd be able to basically use it to grip onto prey or onto a carcass and allow them to better get situated so they can rip meat off and things like that. A very interesting adaptation, which is very likely that this guys could have, because we don't have, I believe, feet from Giganotosaurus. So it's very possible. It may not be a Megaraxes thing. Could be very much a Gigantosaurine thing or a Carcharodontosaur thing, which is quite cool. So we're going to let these guys run off and do their thing. So that's all the last bits from OG Bear's part 2 of his paleo edits. So really nice to see that done. And nice to see a good Giga. How can you not love a good Giga? But hopefully you guys don't walk in front. Oh, you're going to walk in front, of course you are. Go away. Okay, now we have a look at our cool new animal. So this is obviously what you saw in the thumbnail. We've got Achillobator, which is a really, really interesting animal, and I'm excited to talk about it to you. And it's done by JWE2. So here we have a really nice Achillobator. Really, really cool animal. Let's have a look at you while you're there. So Achillobator, which means Achilles' hero, was a genus of large dromaeosaur that lived in Asia during the late Cretaceous period between 96 and 89 million years ago in what is now the Baranshiri Formation, with one species known, Achillobator giganteus, which was discovered in 1989 during a Mongolian-Russian field expedition to Mongolia and was described in 1999. Remains of the type locality of Achillobator actually may represent additional specimens, and is actually the largest and first dromaeosaur known from the Barashe Formation. So as I mentioned, discovered in 1989, found in south-central Mongolia, around the Gobi Desert, and it's from the Barashe Formation, which comes from the late Cretaceous, with like all sorts of remains from like dorsal vertebrae, teeth, a maxilla, things like that. And it came from the name Achillobator, which comes from Achilles, which was the large Achilles tendons that supports the sickle claw, and also refers to Achilles, the Greek hero, and the old Mongolian word for Batar, which means hero. So it's basically the Achilles hero, or the Achilles hero, which pretty much what it means. Yep. But however, the description was published in a very preliminary font, and it was not completed. Had a bunch of typos, where it was kind of redescribed and revised, and kind of I believe it was 2012 or so. But there's also some large dromaeosaurs that came from a large Japanese Mongolian paleontology expedition. Kind of found a large dromaeosaur claw in the same type of locality, which may belong to this guy, but another species as well. It could be quite interesting. And there is also evidence of chimeras and things like that, which is very complicated when you get to the taxonomy and paleontology, things like that. But in terms of its size, these guys were actually one of the largest described Dromaeosaur taxa. So up there pretty much with things such as like Utahraptor, things like that. They reached about 3.9 to 5 meters or 13 to 16 feet long, about 4 foot at the hip, or about 1.25 meters, and between 165 and 250 kilograms in body mass, though there have been higher estimates such as 348 kilograms, but that's been criticized. But between like 200 and 300 kilograms is kind of the most recent estimates. And although the holotype lacks traces of feather integument, there's strong evidence that suggests that because of relatives, things like that, Achillobator, like many other dromaeosaurs, may have had a full plumage. But because it's Jurassic Park, they couldn't really add all the feathers and stuff, much like the Pyroraptor. And plus, there's been issues with modding feathers. But really cool that we got to see some feathers represented on Achillobator here. It looks really, really nice. And in terms of its skull, it's got quite a deep and robust skull, and it measures about 29 centimeters long. And the teeth are also quite similar, or homoodonty, so that means they're quite similar to each other. And they have about 20 really interesting kind of... they have actually a relatively large skull compared to those of Carnosaurs, which is pretty interesting, which is also cool. And they have very similar teeth. They're serrated, so obviously for biting into things. And we know quite a bit about its anatomy, and kind of different since it's much larger than a lot of others. In the original description it was kind of described as a close relative Dromaeosaurus, and was found within that group Dromaeosauridae, which is close relatives of things like Dromaeosaurus and Velociraptor, kind of those Maniraptorans, and placed in Dromaeosauria. And that was first described in 2009, but the most recent phylogenies suggest that these guys were a sister taxon to Giganotosaurus, and even in 2020 had to recover its position within the Velociraptorines, so related to animals such as Velociraptors and things like that. And even more similarities with Achillobator and Utahraptor suggest that they have a quite close relationship, which is quite interesting. So they would have been in that group Dromaeosaurine, potentially related to Edmontosaurus and Utahraptor. And it makes sense, Utahraptor is both also quite large. And in terms of its paleobiology, it seems that these guys had massive thighs, and you can see these massive legs built for both moderately fast running and potentially would have been great at kicking and leaping onto things, which is quite interesting. And in terms of that predatory behavior, suggested that while other like Unenlagings, Dromaeosaurus might have had that lifestyle of fighting, hunting medium and large prey, unlike the slender Unenlagings, which have been much more fish eaters or potentially eating smaller things. These guys would have been very much big predators eating big things. And they actually test the function of the sickle claw and testing the biomechanics and things like that. And they actually found that these guys were quite ideal for climbing as for the ground-dwelling lifestyle. So they were potentially using these help to climb and help to leap on things and things like that, using raptor prey restraint, where they basically would jump on a prey item, kind of grab it with their claws and try and basically hold it and push it down and try and grab it. And animals like Achillobator and Utahraptor would be obviously too large to use their claws to climb trees, but they would have potentially used them to climb onto prey and bite things like that. And that where the raptor prey restraint kind of thing came from looking at the similarities between the feet and legs of birds of prey and dromaeosaurs, which is quite interesting. And because these guys would have had quite large feathers and quite big wings, unlike what's shown here, they would have potentially used that to help keep themselves upright as they kind of grabbed and stabilized their prey and tried to restrain it, which is quite interesting. And in 2020, they actually looked at the maxillae of Eudromaeosaur taxa that concluded that these kind of guys had different ecologies. So most Asian species had elongate snouts based on the maxilla, which indicate they were kind of selective feeding. Though Achillobator was kind of an exception. It would have been larger and more similar to things like Utahraptor, so they were potentially higher up in the food chain eating larger animals, which is quite interesting. And the remains of this animal has been found in the Baran Shire Formation, which is from the Centonian stage or Sumanian, so about 95 to 89 million years ago, around there. And the environment was relatively humid and had lots of lakes and streams and lots of rivers, things like that. In terms of its ecology, would have been semi-arid, but there would have been angiosperms and things like that. And a lot of very interesting animals it would have lived with that you guys will know about. So lived with animals such as Stegosaurus and Eulochosaurus and Electrosaurus as well, and Chylosaurs such as Talarurus as well, and Ammocephalae and Graciloceratops would have lived with, and a couple other sauropods and things. But there's also quite a few non-dinosaurs known from this area, not including the hadrosaurid Gobihedros, which is another interesting animal that would have been prey for these guys. But there would have been also lots of semi-aquatic and terrestrial turtles, crocodilians, sharks, fish, things like that. And also there's Dinosaurs with an Eulochosaurus and Sigdosaurus would have been potentially prey for these guys as well. With grazers and browsers, with Talirurus being and Chylosaur that it was potentially a grazer, and Tisagnia, which would have been a browser, so different Achillosaurs, you can see that niche petitioning. And that long-necked sauropod Ikutu would have been a really tall herbivore and potentially quite big, and probably too big for these guys to take on, but a young one would potentially be pretty good. But yeah, it would have been quite a rich fauna with all sorts of different animals for this guy to prey on and interact with, which is really, really cool. And it's cool to get a dinosaur that kind of doesn't get quite as much of the limelight in the game. And I kind of wish you get the full feathers like the Pyroraptor, but this very much fits at Jurassic Park, and it's cool that we get to see these feather going on, things like that. Really, really cool, and I'm really happy with how this guy's come out. It looks really pretty. So, yeah, let's let these guys run off and do their thing. So, yeah, I think this would be a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always look at the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.